Hello everyone. Welcome to Dead Time Stories. I know many of you enjoy listening to these videos as you fall asleep. So before you drift off, I'd love for you to leave a comment letting me know where in the world you're tuning in from. And if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Alright, now let's get comfortable, relax, and dive into tonight's story. The rain started the moment Lydia turned the key in the rusted lock. It wasn't a gentle drizzle or a cleansing summer shower, but a steady, insistent downpour that hammered the roof and turned the overgrown lawn into a swamp of black mud and rotting leaves. The kind of rain that made you want to turn back, even if you didn't know what you were running from. But Lydia had already come too far. The letter had arrived on a Monday morning, slipped neatly into her mailbox though there was no postmark, no stamp. The envelope was cream-colored and heavy, the kind of stationery that smelled faintly of dried flowers and old books. She almost didn't open it. Something about the looping handwriting on the front, her full name, Lydia May Cross, made her stomach twist. Inside, just one line. "It's time to come home. Room 6 is ready." No explanation. No signature. She stared at it for hours before deciding to drive up to the estate. She told herself it was curiosity, practicality, maybe even nostalgia. But deep down, she knew it was something else, something darker, older, threaded into her bones like a forgotten dream. Now, standing in the doorway of her family's long-abandoned manor, Lydia couldn't help but feel watched. The house loomed above her, 4 stories of weathered stone and shuttered windows, its gables clawing at the sky like broken fingers. She pushed the door open with a groan of protest. The air that greeted her was cold, still, and oddly damp. Not the dry, musty rot of abandonment, but the wet chill of something recently disturbed. Her boots echoed on the warped wooden floor as she stepped inside, flashlight in hand. "Hello?" she called out, her voice swallowed by the shadows. "Is anyone here?" Silence answered. Except, no, not silence. There was a sound, faint but steady, coming from deep within the house. A low hum, almost like breathing, muffled and slow. She paused, heart stuttering. She turned back toward the open door, and froze. The rain had stopped. But the yard outside was now completely blanketed in fog. Lydia stepped back toward the threshold, blinking at the sudden curtain of white outside. The fog was thick, impenetrable, rising from the ground like steam from a wound. Trees she had passed just minutes ago were gone, swallowed whole. The car, the driveway, the long winding road that brought her here, vanished. She turned slowly, eyes narrowing at the open hallway behind her. "This wasn't here before," she whispered. The entrance hall had always been narrow, leading to a stairwell that climbed in a spiral. She remembered it clearly, remembered running up those stairs as a child, barefoot, laughing, her fingers brushing the banister worn smooth by generations. But now the hall stretched further than it should have. 7 doors lined the right-hand side, each identical in shape, with black iron knobs and pale numbers etched in tarnished brass. Room 1, Room 2, Room 3, and at the very end, Room 6. The door was darker than the rest, newer, as if the others had grown old and it had just arrived. She took a step forward, the floor groaning beneath her weight. Her flashlight flickered. Once, then again, a third time, and then steadied. Something moved at the edge of her vision, too quick, too soft to catch. A blur in the reflection of a cracked hallway mirror. When she whipped around, there was nothing but her own face, pale and drawn, eyes wide. "Okay," she muttered. "Just the house settling. Just shadows." But even she didn't believe that. She reached for her phone and swiped it on. No service. Not even a bar. Of course not. With a deep breath, Lydia began moving again, pausing at each door. They were all closed, all identical, except for small differences. Room 2 had a keyhole filled with wax. Room 4's handle was warm, like someone had just touched it. Room 5 had something scratched into the wood so faintly she had to tilt the flashlight just to read it. Don't listen. She blinked. It was gone. Just a smudge in the grain. Her boots whispered across the rug that ran the length of the corridor. The deeper she moved into the house, the quieter it became. Not the silence of emptiness, but the silence of attention. The hush of something listening, waiting. She reached room 6. The key was already in the lock, and it was turning itself. Lydia staggered back, breath catching in her throat as the key rotated with a slow, deliberate click. The door creaked open, just a sliver, revealing nothing but darkness inside. Not the kind her flashlight could pierce. This was thicker, greedier, like ink spilled across the fabric of the world. She stood frozen, listening. No footsteps. No whispers. No growl from the other side. Only the faint ticking of something, like a clock, coming from deep within the room. She called out again, softer this time. Hello? No answer. Lydia's fingers curled around her flashlight. She took a breath, steadying her heartbeat, and nudged the door wider with her foot. The hinges gave way reluctantly, groaning like they hadn't moved in a century. The hallway light behind her cast a dim glow across the room's entrance, illuminating edges. A four-poster bed with tattered lace curtains, a high-backed wooden chair turned toward the corner, and a massive mirror above an old-fashioned vanity. Something about that mirror made her skin crawl. Just a room, she murmured. Just a room. She stepped inside. The moment her boot crossed the threshold, the air shifted. Warmer, staler, sweet almost. The scent of something floral and decayed, a mixture of lavender and mold. The door clicked shut behind her. She turned sharply, rattling the knob. Locked. Her flashlight flickered again. This time, it didn't stop. She slapped it once, twice, and the beam steadied. Then she swept it slowly across the room. Everything was clean, unlike the rest of the house, untouched by dust. The bed was made, its sheets freshly pressed. The vanity was free of cobwebs. A porcelain basin sat beneath the mirror, filled with water so still it looked like glass. And the ticking, it wasn't a clock. It was coming from the mirror itself. Lydia stepped closer, eyes drawn toward it to spite herself. Her reflection stared back, only it wasn't quite right. The face was hers, but not. The smile came too slowly. The head tilted a second late. And the eyes, her eyes, seemed to gleam in the dark with an intelligence that wasn't hers. Her reflection raised a hand. Lydia didn't. She stumbled back, hitting the chair behind her with a gasp. Then, her reflection mouthed a single word, slow and soundless. Stay. Lydia stared in frozen horror as her reflection held its smile, calm and chilling. The words still echoed in her mind despite being silently mouthed, stay, as if the sound had bypassed her ears and nestled somewhere deep behind her eyes. She turned away sharply, refusing to meet its gaze again. This is a dream, she whispered. Just a dream. It has to be. She pressed her palms to her face, breathing deeply, grounding herself in the feel of her own skin. It was clammy and cold. Real. Too real. She opened her eyes. The mirror was still there, but her reflection had returned to normal. Perfectly mirrored movements now, her flashlight beam dancing in unison across the glass. The mocking smile was gone, the delay erased. But she didn't trust it. Her gaze dropped to the basin beneath the mirror. The water was perfectly clear, unnaturally so. She crouched slowly and peered into its surface. No reflection. It was like staring into a bottomless well, black and infinite. Something inside shifted, just a ripple, faint and sudden. Lydia recoiled, stumbling back against the bedpost. Her hand hit something rough. She turned. A note had been pinned to the post with a long rusted nail. A single sheet of yellowed paper, curled at the edges, the ink faded and smudged as if touched by damp fingers. She tugged it free and brought it under her flashlight. In elegant, old-fashioned handwriting it read, "Do not sleep in this room. Do not eat what is offered. You are not alone here. If the mirror speaks, do not answer. If the bed sighs, do not lie down. The door will only open when it forgets you." Her throat tightened. She read it again. "What the hell is this?" she whispered. A creak echoed behind her. Not from the door. From the vanity. From the chair. It had moved. She hadn't touched it. She turned the flashlight toward it. The chair now faced the mirror directly. And though it had been empty before, now it wasn't. A figure sat in it. Not quite a woman. Not quite anything. Just a shape in the flickering light. Long black hair spilling down over bony shoulders. Hands folded neatly in her lap like a doll waiting to be played with. Lydia's heart climbed into her throat. The figure did not move. But the mirror behind it was smiling again. Lydia's breath left her in a slow, shuddering exhale. She took a single step back, her boot creaking against the warped floorboards, the sound sharp in the otherwise suffocating silence. The figure didn't stir. It just sat there, still as a painting, its hair draped like wet silk, hiding its face. She dared another glance at the mirror. The reflection no longer matched the room. In the glass, the woman in the chair was smiling, lips thin and stretched too far, eyes wide and glassy. But in the real room, the figure remained unmoving, passive, almost asleep, or pretending. Lydia's flashlight trembled in her hand. She tightened her grip, squaring her shoulders, forcing herself to breathe. She took a cautious step closer, angling her light to better see the figure's face beneath that curtain of hair. "Hello?" she said softly, the sound dry and raw in her throat. "Can you hear me?" No response. "I'm not supposed to be here. I didn't know this room was..." She broke off. What was she even doing? Apologizing to a stranger? To a shape? Her skin prickled, and she fought the rising urge to bolt back toward the locked door and bang on it until it gave. The figure's fingers twitched. Just the faintest motion, like the flex of tendons after sleep. Then her head lifted. Lydia staggered backward, the flashlight beam flailing wildly. The woman's face emerged from beneath the veil of hair, pale and drawn and too perfect. Porcelain smooth skin, a nose slightly too sharp, lips that barely moved as they parted. The eyes were the worst. Empty. Not like glass eyes or blind ones. These were hollow, deep, endless, yawning pits that stared without seeing, and yet saw everything. Lydia opened her mouth to scream. The woman lifted a single finger to her lips. Shhhhhhhh. Her mouth didn't move, but the sound filled the room. It wasn't loud. It wasn't threatening. It was gentle, loving even, but it echoed with something ancient. Lydia slapped both hands over her ears. No. No. This isn't happening. She turned, lunging for the door. The knob burned her palm, red hot and humming beneath her skin. She yelped and stumbled back. Behind her, the chair scraped against the floor. The woman was standing now. The scraping sound was like teeth grinding through bone. Lydia's heart pounded so loudly she could hear nothing else. Until the chair stopped, until the figure no longer stood behind her, but beside her. She felt it. The temperature dropped sharply as if the air itself recoiled in her lungs. She turned. The woman was inches away. No sound had marked her movement. Up close, her skin was waxen, almost translucent. Veins like hairline cracks webbed across her jaw and neck, pulsing slowly. Her head tilted, twitching slightly, too precisely, like a marionette guided by a hesitant hand. Lydia couldn't move, couldn't speak. The woman smiled. It was slow, deliberate, a pulling of lips across white teeth that seemed too large for her mouth. Her lips moved, not like before, not a shush, but full words, silently shaped. You broke the first rule. Lydia shook her head, backing away. I don't understand. What rule? The woman didn't follow. She simply pointed to the bed. The pin note Lydia had found was gone. In its place, a new one. She hesitated, then stepped carefully across the room. She avoided the mirror, avoided the woman's stare, though she could feel it like pressure against the back of her skull. The new note was written in the same elegant script. You saw her. You spoke. You stayed. Underneath, in smaller print. Now you must listen. As she finished reading, the walls of the room began to groan. Long, low sounds, like the house had taken a breath. The floorboards under her boots flexed gently, unnaturally, like lungs expanding. And then came the ticking. It no longer came from the mirror. It came from within the walls. Lydia spun toward the door again, her panic rising. The knob remained red and glowing, impossible to touch. She tried her sleeve, wrapping it around her hand. Nothing. The metal resisted, humming with stored energy, vibrating like a live wire. She backed away slowly, heart racing. Then the woman spoke. This time, her voice was real. It came in a whisper that carried despite its softness, brushing across Lydia's skin like wine through a keyhole. The door forgets slowly. Lydia stared at her, wide-eyed. What does that mean? The woman gave a slow, elegant blink. Until it does, you are mine. Lydia stumbled backward, her spine hitting the edge of the vanity. Bottles rattled on its surface. Perfume, powders, tiny vials filled with substances in shades of red and brown. None of them had dust. None of them looked old. They could have been placed there just minutes ago. The woman didn't move, only watched. The door forgets slowly. The phrase curled in Lydia's mind like smoke, meaningless and yet terrifying. What are you? Lydia whispered. The woman's mouth twitched. Not a smile. Not an answer. Just the briefest spasm, like the memory of a smile left behind by something that had forgotten how to be human. Lydia turned back to the mirror. It shimmered faintly now, glowing from within as if lit by some invisible candle. Her reflection blinked once, but Lydia hadn't. She stepped closer and saw, with a cold burst of realization, that her reflection was waiting. It didn't mimic her. It watched. Then it began to move. Lydia held still as the mirrored version of herself leaned in, face close, lips parting. This time it spoke, audibly. The voice was her own, but deeper, drawn out, as though filtered through water. She can't lie. She can't leave. But you can choose. What choice? Lydia whispered. Play. The reflection smiled. Or listen. Behind her, the chair scraped again. The woman moved toward the bed and sat gently on its edge. The room sighed with her weight. The air shifted again, thicker now. Warmer. Closer. Lydia looked between her reflection and the figure on the bed. Her gut twisted with dread. I don't want either of those things, she said, voice trembling. Her reflection's eyes narrowed. Then the room will decide. Suddenly, the basin on the vanity began to fill. Black water surged up from nowhere, sloshing quietly over the rim but never spilling. It rippled, and something beneath the surface turned. The woman on the bed looked up. You should choose, she whispered, her voice like silk draped over broken glass. Before the mirror chooses for you. The mirror pulsed. Something inside it opened, just for a moment. Lydia saw a hallway that wasn't hers. A place that didn't exist. Stone walls. Firelight. Footsteps. Then it was gone. She backed away again, voice cracking. Okay. Okay, I'll play. Just tell me how. Her reflection grinned. The game begins when the clock chimes. You must find the sound. The moment Lydia spoke the words, I'll play, the air thickened, coalescing into a strange stillness, like the house was holding its breath. Even the woman on the bed seemed to react. Her head tilted up slightly, as if sniffing the air, eyes gleaming like wet obsidian. Then, somewhere deep within the walls, a chime sounded. Low, hollow, ancient. It echoed through the floorboards and shook dust from the ceiling. Lydia flinched as the mirror responded with a pulse of light. Her reflection vanished, replaced with a new image. Not a reflection now, but a scene. A corridor. It wasn't the hallway she'd entered through, though it looked similar. This one was older, lit by wall-mounted candelabras flickering with blue flames. At the far end, just barely visible, stood a grandfather clock. Its pendulum swung, but it made no sound until it struck the hour again. Chime. The mirror's surface rippled, and a whisper brushed Lydia's ear like a kiss. Find it. Before it stops. She spun, searching for the sound's source, but the room had returned to silence. The woman on the bed smiled faintly, hands folded primly in her lap. Lydia turned back to the mirror. The hallway scene remained. Somewhere, she knew, the clock was real. Somewhere in the house. Or somewhere behind the mirror. She didn't know which terrified her more. The doorknob behind her clicked. She whirled. It had dimmed, no longer glowing red-hot. Slowly, cautiously, she reached out and tested it. The metal was cool. She turned the handle. It opened. A different hallway waited beyond. This one wasn't hers. Gone were the water-damaged portraits and peeling wallpaper. This corridor was narrow, its walls smooth and cold, carved of gray stone. Dim torches flickered in iron brackets. There was no dust, no warmth, no color, just silence, and the faint ticking of the clock. She stepped through. The door behind her slammed shut. Lydia jumped and turned, but the door was gone. Nothing but wall behind her now. Smooth stone. Seamless. As if it had never been there at all. She was inside the mirror. Or something much worse. Ahead, the hallway stretched into darkness. She started walking. With each step, the air grew colder. Her breath fogged before her, and her flashlight dimmed to a sullen orange glow, as though the batteries were draining faster in this place. Then she saw it. At the end of the corridor, the clock. It stood nearly 8 feet tall, carved from wood that shimmered faintly in the torchlight. Its face was blank, no numbers, no hands, but the pendulum swung with a steady rhythm. Tick, tick, tick. She took a step closer. A whisper came from the base of the clock. Choose a door. And suddenly, they were there. 7 doors. All around her. Only one led back. Lydia's eyes darted from door to door, her flashlight flickering like a heartbeat. They stood in a circle around her, perfectly spaced. Each one was identical in size and shape, arched at the top, made of smooth, dark wood, and set into the stone as though they'd grown there. But each had a different symbol carved into its surface. A fiada. The voice came again, softer now, as though echoing from a great distance. Only one returns you. Only one shows truth. Only one keeps time. The rest remember you. Lydia stepped toward the door with the feather. She didn't touch it. Just watched. Nothing moved. No change in air. She circled the room, stopping at each one, searching for a hint, anything. The cracked mirror door made her recoil. It looked too much like the vanity back in room 6. Her reflection was faintly visible in the shattered glass. Only, it blinked when she didn't. No, not that one. She turned to the flame. Warmth radiated from it, just enough to feel on her face. Comforting, almost. But as she stepped closer, She caught the faintest scent of burning hair. The keyhole seemed tempting. A way out? But there was no key. Then she saw it. The door with the bell had a note pinned to it. Old, water-stained, with the same elegant handwriting she'd seen before. This one rings with the others. If it tolls, do not answer. If it stays silent, you are already gone. Lydia swallowed hard. The twisted tree door had something scratched into the wood, deep gouges that looked like claw marks. Or fingers. Only the closed-eye door had no marks, no scent, no presence. Just silence. It almost seemed peaceful. She touched her fingers to it gently. The surface was cool. Behind her, the clock ticked again. Louder this time. Slower. Tick. Tick. Her time was running out. I have to choose, she whispered. One of them leads back. The door with the keyhole drew her gaze again. She stepped closer, lifted her flashlight, and blinked. There was something inside the hole. An eye. It blinked. Lydia staggered back. The door with the closed eye swung open. Not with force, just a gentle inward motion, like an invitation. Warm candlelight spilled out from within. She heard something on the other side. Not words. Not breathing. A lullaby. The lullaby was soft, like something from another century, a lilting melody plucked on unseen strings. It floated gently from the doorway, carried on air that smelled of chamomile and something faintly sweet, like sugar left too long in a warm cupboard. Lydia stood frozen at the threshold. She glanced back, half expecting the clock to have vanished. But it remained behind her, now completely still. The pendulum no longer swung. Its face had darkened to black. Her breath caught in her throat. The door with the closed eye remained open, waiting. A hum pulsed in the stone beneath her boots. Something alive, like the house itself, was urging her forward. Her instincts screamed for caution, but something else pulled harder. A quietness in her chest. A tug of comfort she hadn't felt since she was a child being rocked to sleep by her grandmother's gentle hands. She stepped through. The door closed silently behind her. Lydia turned, but it had already vanished, just blank stone in its place. She was in a narrow corridor now, lined with delicate wallpaper and pale blue patterns of vines and moons. Soft, golden candlelight flickered from sconces, and a faint breeze whispered through the passage, carrying the lullaby farther ahead. She walked. It didn't feel like the other parts of the house. It didn't feel bad, not yet. As she turned a corner, she came upon a nursery. The door stood slightly ajar, painted white with a brass handle shaped like a swan's neck. She hesitated, then nudged it open. The room beyond was bathed in golden light. Toys lined the shelves, wooden dolls, tin cars, puzzle boxes. An old rocking horse sat beside a lace-curtained window. A mobile of paper stars hung from the ceiling, spinning slowly despite the still air. And in the center of the room sat a cradle. It rocked gently on its own. The lullaby seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere. No instrument, no player. Just the sound itself, curling like smoke through the nursery. Lydia stepped toward the cradle, every instinct in her body urging her not to. She peeked inside. Empty. But still, it rocked. She reached out slowly, fingers brushing the rim, then paused. Something was under the blanket. A shape. Small. Still. She held her breath and peeled the fabric back. It was a doll, but not like the others. Its eyes were sewn shut. Its face painted with a delicate, almost human expression. Its hands were curled into fists, and a key protruded from its back, like a wind-up toy. There was a tag around its neck. Lydia leaned in. It read, "Win me and remember." She reached for the key. Behind her, something creaked. The rocking horse had turned. The rocking horse faced her now. It had moved in silence, without even the floorboards betraying it. Lydia stared, her breath caught halfway to panic. The mobile above the cradle spun faster, casting star-shaped shadows along the wallpaper. The lullaby had changed. Slower now, dragging, minor chords bleeding into dissonance. She looked back at the doll. Still. Waiting. She couldn't explain the certainty crawling along her skin, but she knew this doll was part of the game. Of the mirror's test. Of the house's will. Her fingers trembled as they closed around the key. It was warm. She hesitated one last time, then turned it. Once. Twice. 3 times. A faint series of clicks echoed into the room, then fell silent. The doll shivered in her palm. Its head lolled to the side. Then it spoke. In her grandmother's voice. "Do you remember the violet dress, Lydia? The one you spilled ink on?" Lydia dropped the doll. It hit the cradle and bounced softly to the floor. "No," she breathed. No. How do you?" "We washed it together." The voice continued from nowhere, everywhere, echoing in the room. "You cried when the color ran. But I told you it was still beautiful." The rocking horse creaked once. Then again. Rocking now. There was no wind, no motion in the air, but it moved steadily, as if pushed by unseen hands. Lydia backed toward the door. It wasn't there. Just wall. Panic seized her lungs. "Let me out," she whispered. The doll twitched on the floor. "You stayed away too long, child." Lydia spun to the mobile. The paper stars were no longer paper. They had yellowed, curled, their tips sharpening into pointed glass edges. They swung in slow, menacing arcs. She turned toward the window. It was open. She hadn't touched it. White lace fluttered outward into darkness. Not night. Not sky. Just black. Endless, pulsing black. She stepped toward it, dizzy with nausea. Beyond the sill, the landscape was gone. No trees. No lawn. No fog. Just swirling void, and a reflection of her own pale face, floating in the dark like it had been painted on the inside of a mirror. Then her reflection smiled. Not her. Not her smile. It spoke without sound, lips forming one word over and over again. "Remember. Remember. Remember." Lydia clutched her head. "Remember what?" The voice in the cradle answered. "Why you left." Lydia dropped to her knees, hands over her ears. The room pressed in around her, too close, too loud, yet somehow silent. The lullaby had stopped, but its echo threaded through her skull, a phantom rhythm ticking beneath her skin. "Why I left?" she gasped, voice shaking. I don't remember leaving." The doll, now at her feet, rolled gently onto its back. Its sewn eyes still shut, but the mouth moved. No sound now, just movement, like a child miming a secret it was never meant to share. A knock echoed from inside the wall. Then another. Slow. Heavy. Knock, knock. Something behind the wallpaper was trying to get out. Lydia staggered to her feet, pulse roaring in her ears. She turned in a circle, looking for an exit. The room had no doors now. The nursery had sealed itself, a pale blue cage filled with broken stars and whispering memories. And then she saw it. The mirror. It wasn't on the wall, it was in the floor. A perfect circle of silver set into the boards beneath the cradle, like a drain in the center of the world. Light swirled within it, shifting in slow spirals. As she stepped closer, images began to rise from its depths. Moments. Glimpses. A birthday cake with 7 candles. A bruised knee. A broken music box held by a child's trembling hands. And then, a scream. Not hers. Her mother's. It tore through the glass, muffled but shrill, and was quickly silenced, cut off mid-breath, like scissors through string. Lydia reeled back, gasping. "No, that never happened. I never heard that." But the mirror continued. It showed a girl, herself, fleeing down the stairs of the house, no older than 10. Her face was pale, streaked with tears. Her shoes were missing. She held something in her arms, something wrapped in cloth. Something that dripped. The front door slammed. A storm raged outside. And then, silence. The mirror darkened. Lydia backed away, hands over her mouth. "No," she whispered. "I don't remember that. I couldn't have forgotten that." A soft voice behind her, close to her ear, said, "You gave it to the house." She spun. The doll sat upright in the cradle. Its eyes were open now, and they were hers. Lydia stumbled backward, knocking over a tiny wooden chair that cracked against the floor like a snapped bone. The doll's eyes, her eyes, tracked her as she moved. Wide, glassy, not stitched anymore, not painted. They shimmered with tears. "I didn't," she said, her voice thin, panicked. "I didn't give anything to the house. I don't even remember." "You don't want to remember," the doll said in a voice not quite her own. "Too young, too close. But it remembers you." The nursery trembled. The mobile spun violently above her, casting razor shadows that danced like claws across the walls. The rocking horse began to sway again, but this time not alone. Other toys were moving. A stuffed rabbit twisted in place. A jack-in-the-box wound itself with soft clicks, though its crank had no hand upon it. The wooden soldiers atop the bookshelf clattered to the floor one by one in mechanical procession, their painted eyes peeling from their sockets like ink running in water. Lydia's breath came in sharp gasps. "What did I do?" The doll stood. It shouldn't have. It had no joints, no legs beneath its tiny cloth dress, but it rose, balanced perfectly at the edge of the cradle. It pointed toward the mirror in the floor. The spiral of light within had returned, only now the shapes in the swirl were clearer. Not memories. Rooms. Rooms she recognized. The kitchen. The parlor. The staircase with the carved oak banister. And one more. Room 6. It waited at the bottom of the spiral like the eye of a storm. "I don't want to go back there," Lydia whispered. The doll cocked its head. "You never left." The room quaked. A loud crack split the ceiling. Above, something crawled across the plaster, long and jointless, dragging itself with wet friction. Dust and splinters rained down. The stars hanging from the mobile exploded into shards of glass, slicing across the cradle, the walls, the crib mattress where the doll had just stood. It didn't flinch. "You gave the house your name," it said. "You gave it your sleep, your silence. One piece at a time." Lydia covered her ears, shouting over the rising din. "I don't remember." The doll blinked slowly. "Then give it what it's missing." From the corner of the room, the jack-in-the-box snapped open. The lullaby returned, but reversed. Garbled. Wrong. Lydia ran for the mirror. She leapt. Falling through the mirror didn't feel like falling at all. There was no rush of wind, no vertigo. Just a sensation like being slowly unwound, thread by thread, until Lydia could no longer feel where her body ended and the house began. Light fractured around her, glass shards of moments tumbling in all directions. She saw herself again and again, through childhood bedrooms, down staircases, past locked doors she didn't recall locking. And always, always that hallway. 7 doors. Room 6. A pulse, slow and ancient, beat at the center of her chest as she tumbled through the spiral. It wasn't hers. It belonged to the house. Then her feet touched wood. Lydia stumbled forward, disoriented. The air was still. Cold. She stood once again at the end of the hallway, the real one, or so it seemed. The wallpaper was peeling. The portraits blurred. A layer of frost clung to the baseboards. Her breath fogged the air. Room 6 waited in front of her. But the door was already open. Inside, the room was unchanged. The same four-poster bed, the vanity, the mirror above it pulsing faintly. But something was different, felt different. The air pressed harder against her chest. The walls seemed to shift when she wasn't looking directly at them, like they breathed with the rhythm of a sleeping giant. The chair by the vanity had returned to its original position, facing the mirror. Someone sat in it. Not the woman herself. Lydia stared at her own back. The same sweater. The same auburn braid down her neck. Her reflection, the one she'd spoken to, run from, now sat in the room with her, as real as flesh. The Lydia in the chair looked up into the mirror and smiled. "You remember now," she said without turning. Lydia's throat closed. "Not all of it," she said quietly. "Only pieces." The sitting Lydia stood, moving with the same careful grace she herself did. It was like watching a play performed in perfect mimicry, a distorted rehearsal of her choices, her regrets. "Then come closer," the other Lydia whispered. "Finish remembering." A wave of nausea hit her as she stepped forward. In the mirror, the spiral was gone. Now there was a door. Iron-bound. Familiar. The kind of door found in basements, or cellars. A chain wound around the handle. Lydia's hand moved without her permission. She touched the mirror, and the room groaned around her, sighing open like a mouth. The door in the mirror unlatched. Something began to climb the stairs beyond it. The mirror fogged, not with heat or breath, but with a kind of internal condensation, like it what from the inside. Lydia stepped back, instinct flaring. The door in the glass had opened fully now, its heavy iron frame yawning into darkness. The stairs beyond it were stone, slick with moisture, spiraling down into something unseen. But something was coming up. Each step echoed louder than the last. Slow, deliberate, like whatever climbed did not need to hurry, because it already knew where she was. The other Lydia, the one who had sat in the chair, turned to face her now. She looked exhausted. Not physically, but something deeper. Her eyes were dark beneath the lids, rimmed in purple shadows like bruises blooming outward. Her skin had lost its tone, pale as porcelain. She looked empty. "I stayed too long," she whispered. Lydia's voice caught. "Are you me?" The other Lydia gave a tired smile. "No, not anymore." The mirror pulsed. A heavy, wet thud echoed again from the stairs in the reflection. Closer now. The steps creaked under the weight of something not built for walking. Lydia's skin crawled. "What is it?" she asked, barely above a whisper. The other Lydia looked back at the mirror with a kind of sorrow in her eyes. "It's the part of you the house kept. The piece you traded." "I didn't trade anything," Lydia said, backing toward the bed. Her double didn't follow. She only watched. "You did," she said. "When you ran, you left it behind. You made a deal without knowing. But the house never forgets a gift." Thud. Something wet slapped the mirror from the inside. The glass didn't break. It rippled, like a pond surface disturbed by a falling stone. Lydia's reflection disappeared. Now the mirror only showed a stairwell, and a shape, round-shouldered, tall, its limbs too long, dragging behind it like ropes of flesh. It was faceless. Or maybe its face was just wrong. It moved like a memory she had tried to erase. "You have to lock the door again," the devil said. Lydia turned to her. "How?" She pointed to the chair. A key now lay on the vanity beside it, black metal, jagged, old. "You have to give something back," the other Lydia said. "Something you still need." The creature was nearly at the top now. Its hands gripped the doorframe inside the mirror. Lydia grabbed the key. The room shook. The bed sighed, exhaling dust. The wallpaper peeled back in strips. The mirror flashed, distorting, as the thing began to pull itself through. One leg, then another, then its chest, glistening and heaving. It reached a hand toward the glass, and the mirror began to crack. The first crack snaked down the mirror's surface with the sound of ice splintering beneath a heavy foot. Lydia clutched the black key tightly, its teeth biting into her palm. The jagged edges pulsed faintly, warm now, as if drawing strength from her skin. She stared into the mirror, heart hammering, watching as the creature strained to force its head through the surface of the glass. Its features were shifting, flickering, sometimes a child's, sometimes a hollow mask, sometimes her own face stretched into a scream she couldn't hear. "You have to do it now," the other Lydia said. She hadn't moved from the chair, but her voice cracked, dry and desperate. "The key only works if you're willing to lose something." "What does that even mean?" Lydia shouted, stepping toward the mirror as it groaned under the creature's weight. The cracks widened. The house was coming apart. The floor trembled beneath her boots. Hairline fractures spidered through the wood, and the walls pulsed like lungs filled with smoke. The mirror's surface shimmered once more, just long enough to show her something. A flash. Herself, maybe 10 years old, running barefoot down the old stairwell again. But this time, she wasn't alone. She carried something bundled in a blood-stained sheet. A noise chased her down the steps. A low moan. Then a name. "Lydia." She squeezed her eyes shut. "No. I don't want this. I didn't ask for any of this." The other Lydia stood now, her voice calm but stern, like a tired parent soothing a frantic child. "You asked the moment you forgot. The moment you chose to forget. The house doesn't care if you meant to. It just wants its balance." Another hand punched through the mirror, long-fingered and gray, its nails splintered and curling inward like hooks. It braced against the frame, and the glass splintered again, sending jagged fragments across the vanity. Lydia turned to the black key. An engraving now glowed faintly across its surface. Memory. It hit her all at once. The key didn't unlock a door. It took something. Something that belonged to her. Her fingers trembled. "If I give it something," she whispered, "can I leave?" The other Lydia nodded. "If it's enough." Behind them, the mirror began to bleed. Thick, tar-like ichor oozed from the cracks, spilling in slow lines across the floor. The creature's mouth gaped, too wide, impossibly wide, filled with rows of human teeth. It spoke in her mother's voice. "Give me what you owe." Lydia turned. The moment the black key touched her chest, it sank in, slowly, with no pain, just an unnatural coldness that spread beneath her skin like ink spilled into water. Lydia gasped, her eyes flying open as a shock of memory surged through her body. She was 7 again. A thunderstorm raged outside. She was in the hallway, barefoot, clutching a bundle. It was warm. It was breathing. And it was wrong. Inside that cloth, something whimpered like a sick animal, something that should not have existed. She ran. Her mother's voice echoed down the stairs, shrill and shaking. "Lydia! Don't go in there! Put it down!" But Lydia didn't stop. She fled to the basement. To the old wooden door. The one the family never used. The one that had been nailed shut for a reason. And she opened it. The mirror rippled violently in front of her now, the creature's arms fully through, shoulders pressing against the edges, its face leering with a hunger too large to fit its skull. The black key sank deeper. Lydia cried out, not from pain, but from loss. Something was slipping. Something vital. "What did you give?" her double asked, voice tight. Lydia's knees buckled, and she dropped to the floor. Her vision dimmed, her breath short. "My name," she whispered. "I gave it my name." The key vanished into her chest. She gasped, and the room stilled. The mirror froze. The creature halted mid-emergence, its mouth still open, its fingers flexing in confusion. A deep groan rolled through the walls like thunder from beneath the foundation. The glass stopped bleeding, and then the cracks began to seal, one by one. The mirror pulled inward, sucking the creature back into itself like breath returning to lungs. It resisted, snarling silently, clawing at the edges, but the key had been turned. The trade accepted. The surface closed like liquid silver drawn tight. Then silence. Lydia slumped forward, weak, shaking. The air felt empty, thin. The other Lydia knelt beside her. "You did it," she said softly. "You locked it away again." Lydia blinked slowly. Her mouth opened, but her voice caught. She couldn't speak. She couldn't say her name. It was gone, just like the key had promised. The other Lydia helped her to her feet. She felt lighter, hollowed out. "Can I leave now?" she asked, not with her mouth, but with her eyes. Her double nodded. "You're free of this room." A door creaked open behind them. The hallway waited. Not the twisted version she had fallen into, not the mirror world. Home. But as Lydia stepped through it, she paused. The other Lydia stood at the vanity now, hands folded in her lap once more. "You'll forget me," Lydia said, voice raw. Her double smiled faintly. "You already did once." And the door closed behind her. Lydia stepped back into the hallway, the real hallway. The peeling wallpaper, the warped rug, the faint scent of damp wood. But something had shifted. The air felt thinner, like the house had exhaled after holding its breath for too long. The lights were out, but her flashlight still glowed in her hand, steady now, no longer flickering. She turned in place slowly. The door to room 6 was closed behind her. The keyhole was gone. There was no handle. Just smooth, sealed wood. She reached out and touched it. Cold. Unmoving. Like it had never opened at all. No longer a door. Just a scar in the wall. She backed away slowly. Something stirred beneath her thoughts, and it wasn't fear, it was absence. The lingering silence in her mind where her name should have been. She tried to speak it. Nothing came. Not even a whisper. She leaned against the opposite wall, gasping. It wasn't just her name. It was the shape of herself, something vital carved out. Memories frayed at the edges like burned film. She still remembered the house, the room, the mirror. But the why and the how had begun to slip through her fingers. She looked down. Her hands were trembling. In her palm lay a scrap of parchment. It hadn't been there before. She unfolded it with shaking fingers. In that same elegant, looping script. "The house has taken your name. You have bought your freedom with forgetting. But forgetting does not last forever." A sound, soft, rhythmic, echoed down the hallway. Tick, tick, tick. The grandfather clock? No. Different. Quieter. Closer. She turned toward room 1. The sound came from inside. Tick, tick, tick. She took a step back. Then another. The hallway stretched behind her once more, longer than it should be. The exit, the front door, the staircase. It was all further now. Pulled deeper into the house like thread through a needle. "No," she whispered. "I gave it what it wanted. I paid." The ticking grew louder. Now it came from every door. Room 1. Room 2. Room 3. Each one clicked gently. Locks unlatching. They were opening. One by one. The locks unlatched in slow succession. Click, click, click. Lydia spun, her breath catching in her throat. The hallway now pulsed with quiet intent, as though the house itself was testing her resolve. The once dormant doors, each numbered and still, now stood slightly ajar, leaking dim light and muffled sounds she couldn't place. The air grew colder, but not like before. It wasn't ghostly, it was inquisitive. The house was watching her. And now it wanted more. She backed away from room 1, whose door had creaked open no more than 2 inches. From within came the faint sound of weeping. A woman's voice. Broken. Familiar. I didn't know. I didn't see it coming. Please, please don't let them take her. Lydia's fingers curled into fists. The words wrapped around her like smoke. They coiled in the empty space where her name used to live. She stepped to room 2. Its door had opened wider. Inside, she could see part of a desk. Papers scattered. Blood on the floor. A photograph pinned to the wall. A little girl with her same eyes, smiling. Then, a sound wood splintering. A breath held for too long finally let go. Lydia stepped back. What is this? Each room wasn't just a door, it was a memory. But not hers. Not all hers. They bled into her like borrowed stories, unfinished chapters inked over her own pages. Room 3 groaned open. Inside, a bathtub. Water spilled over the edge, black and thick. A single bare foot dangled over the porcelain edge. She didn't want to see the rest. Stop looking. Stop looking. But room 4 was open now too. Inside, her grandmother. Rocking in that same chair from room 6, hands folded. Her eyes were closed. Her mouth moved in a silent prayer. Behind her, shadows crawled up the walls like fingers groping for light. Lydia turned to run. The hallway shifted beneath her feet, stretching again, pulling her further inward. Room 5 swung wide. She froze. This one was her memory. The basement. The nailed door. The one she had opened. Inside, she saw herself, 10 years old again. Standing before that sealed threshold with a bundle in her arms. She turned slowly toward the adult Lydia at the door, and her eyes were empty. Completely blank. Then the child Lydia spoke without sound. You didn't bury it. You gave it roots. Room 6 shuddered behind her, the seam in the wall twitching like a muscle remembering pain. And then, room 7 creaked open. There was never room 7. The hallway exhaled. A voice whispered across the floor like crawling silk. You gave us a name. Now give us a face. Lydia stood before room 7, throat tight, body trembling. There hadn't been a 7th door. Not when she'd first walked down this hallway. Not when she'd played here as a child. It had grown out of the wall like a wound, raw wood, splintered at the edges. No number adorned its surface, but she knew it was room 7. The house hadn't just opened it. It had made it. The knob was bone white, like ivory aged in soil. She didn't want to touch it, but she couldn't walk away. Behind her, the other doors had closed again, their locks clicking into place. They had given her warnings. Fragments. Pieces of a story she had tried to forget. But room 7 wasn't offering anything. Room 7 was waiting. Lydia reached out with slow, reluctant fingers and brushed the doorknob. It turned easily. The door didn't creak. Didn't groan. It opened like it had been waiting for years. The hinges were too quiet. Too eager. Beyond it was not a room. Not yet. It was a dark corridor, stone walls dripping with moisture, the scent of mold and damp rot so strong it made her gag. It sloped downward. No torches, no lights. Just a faint reddish glow coming from somewhere far below. She stepped through. The door didn't close behind her. It dissolved. She turned to look back and found only smooth stone, warm to the touch. No seams. No frame. No escape. The hallway continued downward. Her boots scraped over steps slick with moss. The light grew stronger, pulsing gently like a heartbeat. She descended. After what felt like minutes, hours, years, the corridor opened into a vast underground chamber. The ceiling arched high above, disappearing into shadows. The walls were lined with mirrors, each warped and fractured, their surfaces cloudy and trembling. They showed faces, some hers, some not. All versions of her, staring back with hollow eyes. And in the center of the room, a pedestal. Upon it sat a mask. It was pale, porcelain, feminine, with delicate lips, blank eyes, and no expression. She stepped closer. Behind her, the mirrors began to hum. A low, rattling tone. The mask called to her, not with words, with hunger. She knew, without being told, what it wanted. "Give us a face," the house had said. And here it was. The price. She reached toward the mask with shaking fingers. It was warm. It breathed. As her fingertips brushed it, the mirrors groaned in unison. And the mask smiled. The smile wasn't on the mask. It was in it. Like something had been waiting behind the porcelain shell, watching through its empty eyes, curled up in the hollows, waiting for skin to cling to. Lydia jerked her hand back, but it was too late. A warmth spread from her fingertips up her arm. Not the feverish burn of sickness, but something slow and thick, like wax poured into her veins. Her fingers twitched. Her breath caught. And the mask, once still, turned slightly toward her. She stared at it in disbelief. "You move," she whispered. A whisper answered, drifting from everywhere at once. "No. You did." The chamber shifted. The mirrors began to tremble. In each of them, Lydia's reflection stared back, but not quite her. Not anymore. Her eyes looked larger, glassier. Her features too perfect, too smooth. Like porcelain. Like the mask. She stepped back, and every reflection mimicked her exactly, but lagged a second too late. All except one. A mirror on the far left corner showed her smiling. She wasn't smiling. Its eyes glinted. Its head tilted. Its hands lifted. The mask in the mirror's reflection was already on her face. Lydia turned toward the pedestal again. The mask now hovered slightly above it, levitating no more than an inch from the stone's surface. The air beneath it shimmered like heat rising from pavement. The humming grew louder, deeper, pulling at something in her chest, in her lack of name. The room wanted completion. The trade had begun the moment she touched the mask. She stepped forward again, her boots echoing loudly in the silence. "Why me?" she asked. Her voice didn't echo. The mirrors replied in overlapping voices, young, old, her own and others she didn't recognize. "Because you opened the door. Because you forgot. Because you remembered. Because you ran and came back. Because you're hollow." Lydia clenched her fists. "No. I gave you what you wanted. My name. That was the deal." A pause. Then, "You sealed one door. Now seal your face, so we can wear you through the others." The mask rose higher. Its smooth surface began to crack, not with age, but with intention. New lines spread outward like veins, or a spider web. Through them, something shimmered, light, or eyes, or memory. Lydia screamed. The mask flung itself at her. The mask struck her face like ice meeting skin. She staggered backward, arms flailing, but it clung to her, suctioned tight over her mouth and nose. No straps. No strings. Just an invisible force that pressed it down and inward. She tried to scream. Only silence escaped. Not muffled, erased. Her voice didn't exist anymore. Her hands clawed at the mask, nails scraping along its smooth surface. No purchase. It had no edge. No underside. Just one surface now, merged with her skin like it had always belonged. The mirrors screamed. They did not shatter, they sang, with cracking glass and howling reflections. Every version of Lydia arrived inside the walls, their arms pressed against the silver, their faces smeared in anguish. One reached toward her from within, fingers pressed flat, eyes wide with pleading. She understood now. This was not just a mask. It was a key, one that locked you in, one that made you adore. She collapsed to her knees as a flood of sensations, memories not her own, invaded her mind. A girl in a green coat buried alive in a well behind the manor. A man who hung himself in room 3 and knocked for days before someone finally opened the door. A boy born without eyes who still saw the thing in the mirror and called it mother. Each memory flashed behind the porcelain, burned into her thoughts. And then, her own. One she had never seen before. Buried too deep. The bundle she carried down the stairs that night. The whisper that told her where to go. The door she should have never opened. A child's laugh, sharp, not innocent. A laugh from inside the bundle. Her fingers trembled, twitching against the stone floor. The mask's eye holes opened, truly opened, and she saw through them. The mirrors no longer reflected her. They showed the house, the rooms behind the rooms. The hallways no one walked but always existed. The foundation that was deeper than earth, that pulsed with thought and memory and hunger. And at the center of it all, a mirror with no reflection. A mirror that waited. Her lips parted against the mask. No breath. No voice. Just the house speaking through her. We see you. We wear you. We remember. She tried to fight it. Tried to pull herself back. But her hands were no longer hers. Her hands twitched, mechanical now, like limbs on borrowed strings. Lydia watched them move without her will, flexing, opening, reaching. The skin looked the same, familiar lines, freckles, a faded scar on the wrist from a childhood fall. But something beneath stirred, shifted. As if every tendon now belonged to someone else. No, something else. Her mouth opened behind the mask. No sound emerged. Only cold. The pedestal cracked behind her with a dry, brittle snap. A vein of black light split through the stone, pulsing like a heart. Around her, the mirrors stopped screaming. Instead, they began to whisper. Layered voices slithered out of the glass like curling smoke. It wears well. She fought, but she gave. She opened the door with memory. Now we walk with her shape. She tried to scream, to claw at the porcelain now fused to her skin, but her fingers wouldn't obey. Her lungs felt full of ash. Her bones hummed. The mask wasn't just hiding her face. It was rewriting her. One memory at a time. She felt them drain from her. First, the small ones, her father's laugh, the smell of ink on her schoolbooks, the name of the town where she'd grown up. Then deeper things, her first kiss, her first grief, the feel of her mother's hand as they lit candles in winter. They dissolved into the mirrors. The reflections grinned, swallowing her life with silent reverence. She collapsed to the stone floor. Gone. I'm being undone. They're unraveling me. And then, within the mask's endless hush, a whisper. Not the house. Not the mirrors. Her. Some piece of Lydia, small, sharp, screaming, surged to the surface. No. She clenched her teeth, even as the mask tried to pull her jaws apart. Her body spasmed. One word, bright and jagged, flared in the dark. Name. She had no name. But she had will. Her right hand, finally hers again, swept across the floor. Stone. Cold. Glass. Splinters of mirror. She gripped one. Pressed it to her chest. And cut. The mask cracked. A spider web of fractures raced across its surface. The house shuddered. The whispers stopped. And then, the mirrors began to break. The first mirror exploded with a sound like bones snapping underwater. Shards of silvered glass rained down across the chamber, scattering light and memory in all directions. The reflections within the shards, her eyes, her face, her twisted smile, screamed as they hit the floor and vanished into smoke. Then the others followed, one by one. Each mirror cracked from within, as though something trapped behind them had finally begun to thrash. The walls shook. The air pulsed. Lights strobed in sickening waves. And with every fracture, a different version of Lydia was torn apart, some weeping, some furious, some hollow-eyed and silent. Lydia pressed a sliver of mirror glass deeper into her chest. Not to wound, to open, to remind herself she still had something to give. The porcelain mask writhed on her face, warping under the pressure of her defiance. It screamed, not with sound, but with weight. The oppressive pressure of centuries of forgotten names, sealed behind white smiles. And she felt the house recoil. The pedestal split in half, collapsing in a spray of dust and heat. From its center rose a column of shadow, swirling, human-shaped, mouthless. It turned to her, and reached. But she was ready now. Another mirror exploded, and the chamber's floor cracked wide beneath her feet. Through it she saw the house beneath the house, the foundations made of teeth and secrets. The churning mass of everything the house had ever consumed, lives, moments, screams, laughter, all dissolved into memory. She stared into that dark sea and screamed her name. Only she had no name, but the house remembered. The void pulsed with sudden, terrible awareness. Lydia. It hadn't spoken the name in years. Not since she gave it up. But she had taken it back. The mask split fully down the center, falling away from her face in two perfect halves. She gasped. Air, real air, rushed into her lungs. Cold, sharp, alive. The shadows recoiled, howling. The column that had reached for her faltered, its form distorting, unraveling like wet cloth. She threw the mirror shard into its chest. It shrieked in her voice, one of the many stolen versions, and collapsed into dust. The chamber began to collapse. Stone cracked, support beams splintered, and a wind, deep and howling, rushed through from nowhere. It didn't push her back. It pulled her forward, toward the spiral stairway that had once brought her down. Only now it spiraled upward. But the feeling of it remained, tight and cold, like phantom pain. She reached up instinctively, brushing bare skin, the raw edges where the porcelain had clung, leaving shallow grooves in her cheeks. She climbed faster. Around her, the stairwell changed. The stone turned to wood. The damp rot faded. Wallpaper returned to the walls, first as scorched outlines, then full patterns, the twisting ivy and moons from the nursery. She recognized this hallway now. This was hers. The original. But something was still wrong. At the top of the stairs, room 6 stood open, wider than ever. Its threshold pulsed faintly, like it knew she was coming back. No, Lydia muttered. I'm not going in again. But the house whispered. You must. One more time. You broke the reflection. But the frame remains. The hallway behind her sealed with a deep thud. Doors vanished. Walls smooth. There was only room 6 now. A doorway, and the final reckoning inside. Lydia stepped forward. The room waited as it always had, the 4-poster bed, the vanity, the mirror. But now the glass was black, not cracked or glowing. Still. Dormant. But not dead. Something behind it breathed. The chair faced her. Empty. She walked to the mirror and placed both hands on its cold surface. No image returned. Not hers. Not anyone's. Only a slow, rising warmth, like a heartbeat waking from deep sleep. Then, Lydia. Not from the mirror. From within herself. The house no longer held her name, but some part of it still lived inside her. The part that had opened the door. The part that had left something behind. Lydia closed her eyes. She knew what she had to do. Not forget. Forgive. She stood before the mirror, palms flat against its surface, her breath fogging the glass despite its icy touch. Behind her, the room was silent. The bed no longer sighed. The vanity gave off no scent of lavender. Even the ticking, the endless, infernal ticking, had stopped. It was the stillness before something ancient either wakes or dies. Lydia's voice was hoarse when she spoke. I remember now. She wasn't sure if she meant it aloud or inside her thoughts. The mirror didn't respond, not with sound. But a pulse ran through the glass, a ripple like breath across water. The darkness within began to turn. Images swirled again. Not the haunting ones. Not the mask. Not the creature crawling up from the stairs. These were older. Quieter. Her mother brushing her hair on the porch. The golden sun painting everything in warm light. Her father singing softly in the kitchen, hands covered in flour. The night it all ended. The memory she had buried deeper than anything else. A baby. Not hers. Not quite her sibling. Something in between. Born in the house, during a storm, in secret. It had cried once. Only once. Then smiled. A smile that wasn't a baby's. A smile that wasn't meant for this world. Her mother had wrapped it tightly in blankets. Whispered prayers. Hid it beneath the floorboards for a day. Then begged Lydia, pleaded, to take it far away. Downstairs, she had whispered, her voice raw from weeping. Room 6. The old stair. Don't open it. Just leave the bundle there and lock the door. You mustn't look at it again. But Lydia had looked. Worse, she had unwrapped it. And smiled back. The house hadn't taken anything from her. She had given it a face. And now it wanted to finish the story. The mirror bloomed with red light. A faint handprint, small and smudged, appeared on the other side of the glass, like a child had pressed against it from within. Lydia swallowed hard. Her voice was steady now. I gave you what I shouldn't have, but I came back. I remember. And I forgive the girl who opened the door. The mirror cracked. Just once. Not a violent shatter, but a clean, perfect split, top to bottom. The glass slid apart with a sigh, revealing nothing. Not blackness. Not fire. Not teeth. Just light. Soft, golden, warm. The kind of light she remembered from that day on the porch. It spilled out into the room. The house groaned, a final breath, and began to let her go. The golden light poured through the broken mirror like sunrise through a forgotten window. It flooded room 6, brushing across the floor, the curtains, the bedposts. Everything it touched warmed. Not just in temperature, but in memory. The shadows retreated, not in fear, but in relief. Lydia stood still, eyes wide. Her breath slowed. The tension in her chest, the weight she hadn't realized she'd been carrying since she first set foot in the house, since she'd opened that door as a child, dissolved. Not vanished. Not erased. Released. She stepped forward, toward the open mirror. No longer a mirror. A doorway. No longer a reflection. An exit. But not just out of the house. Out of the guilt. Out of the story. As she crossed the threshold, she felt her skin prickle, not in fear, but in awakening. Her name echoed behind her. Not pulled from her again, but spoken freely, softly. Lydia. Her mother's voice. Her father's. Her own. They didn't call her back. They let her go. Light surrounded her. No ground. No ceiling. Just gold. Like she was floating inside a memory of safety, of warmth. Somewhere between dream and waking. In the distance, impossible to measure, stood a door. Not twisted. Not masked. Just a door of old pine wood. With a glass window. A door she remembered from childhood. From a time before everything had gone wrong. The front door. She walked toward it. Each step steadied her, restored her. Her pulse grew stronger, not faster. She could feel herself returning to herself. And when she reached it, she turned the knob. It opened easily. No resistance. No tricks. She stepped out into the morning. The air was crisp. The fog had lifted. Birds chirped in the distant trees, and dew glistened on the overgrown lawn. Her car was parked where she left it, glinting with fresh rain. The house behind her no longer loomed. It stood, quiet, still, waiting perhaps, but not reaching. Not anymore. She looked back at it, hand resting on the driver's side door. "I remember," she whispered, "but you don't own me." A faint breeze stirred the ivy on the stone walls, as if in answer. Then nothing. She opened the car door, slid inside, and turned the key. The engine started without hesitation. As the gravel crunched beneath her tires, the house grew smaller in her rearview mirror, until it disappeared entirely behind a bend in the road. And somewhere behind her, 7 doors closed. Softly. Finally. Lydia drove without music. The road stretched ahead, pine-lined and winding, familiar but uncanny, like walking through a childhood dream you'd half forgotten. She kept glancing in the rearview mirror, expecting to see the house again. But there was only mist dissolving into sunlight, trees thinning along the shoulder, and the occasional rustle of wind brushing across the hood. Her hands were steady on the wheel, but something inside her was trembling. Not from fear. From awareness. From emptiness. The kind you notice only once it's gone. She pulled over by a creek she remembered from years ago, a place her father used to take her to watch frogs in the spring, back when the world was simple and the house was only a story adults whispered about when they thought she was asleep. She stepped out of the car and sat on a rock by the water. Birds chirped overhead. Wind passed through tall grass like a hush. And still, in her ears, she could hear it. Tick. Not real. Not present. Just remembered. A clock that had stopped ticking. A mask no longer worn. A room no longer needed. She reached into her coat pocket without knowing why. Her fingers closed around something small. She drew it out. It was a piece of the mask. Smooth porcelain, no bigger than a coin. Pale white, curved slightly, like the edge of a cheek or the corner of a mouth. There were no cracks in it. No veins of shadow. Just a faint warmth. She held it up to the light. It didn't reflect her face. It reflected room 6. But only for a second. Then it faded, like a fogged mirror clearing. She almost threw it into the creek. Almost. Instead, she wrapped it in an old receipt from her glove compartment and placed it in the glove box. Not as a souvenir. As a reminder. Of the door she opened. And closed. Of the price paid for remembering. And for walking away. As she drove again, she whispered, not as a spell or a prayer, but as a vow. "I'll never go back." And the house, wherever it now waited beneath ivy and wood and time, did not answer. But it remembered her. And always would. 2 weeks passed. Lydia didn't tell anyone about the house. Not the police. Not a therapist. Not even the old neighbor who sent her flowers after hearing she'd finally gone up to the family estate. There were no words. No way to explain the truth without sounding insane. So she settled into quiet. The days passed in muted comfort. Meals she could taste again. Books she remembered loving. The breeze through her apartment window that no longer felt like breath from something waiting. But the nights remained uneasy. It started subtly. The sound of floorboards settling, too measured, too rhythmic. A shadow moving across the mirror in her hallway when she passed. Dreams she couldn't wake from. Always the same corridor. Always 7 doors. And always room 6. Sometimes, in the dreams, the door opened on its own. Sometimes, it was already open. Once, she saw her reflection standing in the hallway, looking back at her. Not smiling. Just waiting. She woke from that dream gasping, the echo of her name spoken in reverse hanging in the air. The next morning, she checked the glove box. The fragment of the mask was still there, cold now, hard, unchanged. She slammed it shut and locked it. Later that evening, she took it to the edge of a walking trail and buried it under a birch tree. 5 feet down. She didn't mark the spot. She didn't pray. Just pressed the dirt back with her foot and whispered, "Stay." That night the dreams stopped. For a while. But one evening, maybe a month later, Lydia came home and found something in her mailbox. No stamp. No return address. Just her name, written in perfect, looping script. Inside, a scrap of parchment. Blank. Except for 7 faint circles drawn in black ink. Beneath them, one word. Knocking. As she held it in her shaking hand, a sound echoed down the hallway behind her apartment. Knock. 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 And she knew. Not all doors stay closed. Not forever. Lydia didn't turn around. Not at first. She stood in her apartment entryway, the letter trembling in her hands. Behind her, silence settled again, thick and patient. The kind of silence that felt like listening. She slowly folded the letter and placed it on the hallway table without looking back. Then, she reached for her phone with fingers that barely obeyed. No signal. Not even Wi-Fi. The screen flickered once before fading to black. She was alone. Except, not quite. Something in the walls shifted. Not movement, not sound. A pressure. Like space bending ever so slightly, expanding in places it shouldn't. Then a whisper. Not behind her. Inside her. Not words. Just the texture of speech. The familiarity of breath curling just beyond comprehension. The whisper of someone you love saying your name in a way you've never heard before. She closed her eyes. Focused. Inhaled. The whisper came again, closer to meaning this time. A question. A request. "Let us in." Her eyes snapped open. "No," she said, voice steady despite her blood pounding. "You're not in anymore. I took my name back." But the house, if that's what it still was, laughed softly. Not cruelly. Affectionately. "We don't need your name anymore." That stopped her. The air turned cold. The shadows in her apartment seemed deeper than before, stretching long across the floor, brushing her feet like vines. She stepped away from them and the whisper followed, curling around her ear. "We have your shape." And with those words, every mirror in her apartment began to hum. The bathroom. The one in the hallway. The edge of the dark television screen. She watched in horror as her own reflection in the foyer mirror blinked independently, then smiled. She didn't. It tilted its head. Knocked, gently, against the glass from the inside. Once. Twice. Then whispered, "Open the door, Lydia." Her voice. But not hers. And behind it, something moved in the reflection's eyes. Not her fear. Not her past. Something new. Something hungry. Lydia stumbled away from the foyer mirror, her back hitting the wall. The knock echoed once more, from inside the glass. Not loud. Not demanding. Polite. That was somehow worse. She stared at the reflection. It looked exactly like her. Same tousled hair, same freckle near the corner of her lip. But it stood too still. Its eyes didn't blink unless she did. Its mouth remained fixed in a half-smile, like someone remembering something she hadn't lived. "Go away," she whispered. Her reflection tilted its head in gentle mockery. Then it did something impossible. It raised its hand without her moving. It wasn't a mirror anymore. It was a window. The reflection pressed its palm against the glass. Lydia's real hand lifted slightly, against her will. Muscle memory tugged her forward, like something inside her bones wanted to match it. The mirror shimmered, surface rippling like a pond. Another knock. This time not from the mirror. From the hallway. Lydia snapped her head around. The sound came from behind her apartment door, 3 slow knocks, rhythmic and familiar. Her chest clenched. Her breath caught. The letter. She turned back to the mirror. Her reflection now stood directly in front of the glass, lips parted. It mouthed the words again carefully. "Let us in." And then the lights in the apartment dimmed. Not flickered. Dimmed. Like the building itself were sighing. A hum started behind the drywall. Faint at first. Then deeper. Rhythmic. Tick-tock, tick. Not from a clock. From below. Lydia's stomach turned. She stumbled backward, away from the mirror, the letter, the knocking. Her feet carried her toward the kitchen instinctively. Light, space, something normal. But the humming followed. From inside the walls. Inside the plumbing. Inside the pipes. The apartment had become a hallway again. Stretching. Lengthening. Just like the house. And the door, the front door, was melting into something else. Tall. Dark. Unmarked. Numbered only with 1 digit. 6. The number was small. Almost insignificant. A curved brass, 6, nailed to the center of her front door, shining like it had always been there. Lydia stepped forward, half in disbelief, half in horror. The door had changed completely. No longer the dull green with chipped paint and a crooked peephole. It was tall now, and possibly so, stretching nearly to the ceiling, made of old wood she knew too well. That grain, that dark varnish, the way it absorbed the light. It was room 6, and it was inside her apartment. Her hands shook. "No," she whispered. "I closed you. I buried you. I burned the path back." But the whisper from the mirror followed her into the hallway, curling around her legs like smoke. "You were never meant to leave. We gave you back your name. Now you must wear your place." She turned, expecting to see her reflection again. It was gone. The mirror was shattered. 7 perfect cracks radiated outward from the center. Her apartment's walls now bore subtle shifts, peeling wallpaper she didn't recognize, the faint outline of doors where none should be. Everything familiar had tilted, slightly off-center, like a photograph hanging just wrong. The knock came again. Not loud. 3 soft, polite raps. Knock. Knock, knock. She stepped backward, hand reaching for the knob on instinct, then catching herself, freezing mid-motion. She remembered the rules. From that note, from the cradle, from the dream memories that had carved themselves into her bones. If it knocks, do not answer. If it opens, do not speak. If it calls you by name, do not turn around. Her throat tightened, because the door was beginning to open. Slowly, soundlessly, a crack of blackness widening between wood and frame. From within, a faint, lavender-sweet scent crept out. And beneath it, rot. The scent of earth that had never seen light. Of cellars. Of the hollow spaces between walls where breath might hide. And then, a voice. Small. Delicate. Familiar. "Lydia?" Her mother's voice. Just like she remembered it. Gentle. Afraid. "Sweetheart? Are you in there? I need help. I can't see." Her lips parted. Her hand twitched toward the door. "Don't speak." The crack widened. The voice trembled. "Lydia, I'm cold." "Can I come in?" Tears blurred her vision. The voice was perfect. Too perfect. "Don't speak. Don't speak." The hinges groaned. And then the voice changed. Not louder. Lower. "You already opened the door once. Now open it again." The voice hung in the air like smoke curling from a long-dead fire. It smelled of memory. Of sorrow. Of promises made in the dark. Lydia stood still, her breath shallow. Her entire body trembled, not from fear, not exactly, but from the weight of the moment. She could feel it. The house had moved, shifted. It no longer lived on a hill miles away in the woods. It lived in her. Or maybe it always had. The gap in the door widened another inch, and the air that slipped out wasn't just cold, it whispered. It brushed her cheek like a fingertip tracing her skin. Inside, there was no light, no shape, just a presence. Enormous, familiar, patient. She stepped back. The floor beneath her creaked, but not the laminate of her apartment. Not anymore. Wood, old and brittle. Just like the hallway. She looked down. The rug was gone. The tiled floor replaced with blackened hardwood, warped and water-stained. The wall to her left now bore a long, vertical crack leaking something thick and dark. The overhead light sputtered once, then failed. She was back. Not in the house itself, but somewhere between. And the door, the new room 6, stood half open now. The voice from within had gone silent, but the air crackled with invitation. Her eyes drifted to the table near the front door. The folded parchment letter was still there. The 7 inked circles now glowed faintly, pulsing with her heartbeat. 6 were filled in. Only 1 remained hollow. She didn't remember writing anything, but her handwriting now S. It pressed to the edge of the frame and curled once, gently beckoning. The child's hand gripped the edge of the doorframe, flesh pale as wax, fingers long and unnaturally still. It didn't move beyond that. It didn't lurch toward her. It didn't beckon again. It just waited. Lydia's mouth went dry. The scent of the room behind the door reached her fully now, thick and suffocating. Not just rot and lavender, something older. Like burned paper. Like mold beneath soaked wood. Like forgotten things trying to breathe again. She looked down at the glowing parchment on the table. The last empty circle pulsed brighter now, faint heat radiating off the page. Her name, freshly written at the top, Lydia May Cross, looked unfamiliar in her own handwriting, as though it belonged to a version of her sealed behind the mirror, still wearing the mask. Something inside her shifted. This wasn't just another door. It was the last one. The final choice. Face what she had let in all those years ago. Or walk away again, and let it fester, feed, follow. Her reflection had said it once. You gave it roots. Now she understood. The house didn't only exist where it was built. It existed wherever she took it with her. In memory. In guilt. In silence. She reached for the door. Her fingers brushed the edge of the wood. Warm. Breathing. The child's hand slipped away, and the door creaked open. Wider. No longer hesitant. Welcoming. She stepped through. The world inside was impossibly vast. Room 6 was no longer a room. It was a place. A liminal pocket of reality where everything she had hidden lived and breathed. The ceiling stretched into blackness. The walls were mirrors, broken and mended and broken again. The floor beneath her shifted with each step, creaking not like wood, but like bones. At the center of it all stood a crib. Just like before. Rocking gently, rhythmically. But now, something breathed within it. Not a doll. Not a dream. Something alive. She approached slowly. The whispering grew louder. Not angry. Not pleading. Hungry. She reached the edge of the crib and looked inside. What lay within had her face. But not her eyes. Its eyes were mirrors. They shimmered, showing everything she had ever feared. And it smiled. Just like it had all those years ago. Then it opened its mouth. And spoke her name. Lydia, it said softly. The sound was perfect. Her own voice as a child, preserved like a photograph, untouched by time. But it didn't feel like a memory. It felt like a trick. like something that had waited behind a wall of mirrors, listening, learning the shape of her breath. Lydia stared down into the crib. The creature stared back. Her face, yes, but smoother, cleaner, emptier. The expression behind those mirrored eyes was not hers. It didn't blink. It didn't breathe like a child. It watched, like a predator who had already memorized the script. And then it stood. Not climbed out. Not rolled over. It stood, full height, bones cracking as it unfolded inside the crib like a paper figure straightening from a fold. It was her, but thinner, longer. Its arms stretched past its knees. Its skin shimmered like wet porcelain. Its lips never moved again after speaking her name. Instead, the mirrors in its eyes shimmered, and the room responded. The walls flickered. Each mirror surrounding them lit up with scenes, dozens of versions of her, from different angles, different ages. All the doors she had opened. All the moments she had almost seen it. All the times it could have entered but didn't. Waiting. Learning. Growing. "You've always been in here," Lydia said, voice low, hoarse. "Haven't you?" The thing tilted its head. It raised one long finger and pressed it to its lips. "Sure." Lydia stepped back. The floor sighed underfoot, each board groaning as if voicing a memory. She tried to tear her gaze away from the thing's face, but it shifted each time she blinked, her face at 10 years old. Then 17. Then yesterday. Then a face she hadn't worn yet. It was preparing. It had worn her shape before. Almost. But now, it had all the pieces. Her name. Her mask. Her memories. Her guilt. "I didn't come back to feed you," she said, her fists clenched. "I came back to end this." The thing stepped out of the crib. No movement. No sound. One moment inside. The next, on the floor, in front of her. Their eyes met. And she understood the truth. The house was never just a place. She had been the door all along. The revelation landed like a nail through her chest. Lydia stood frozen as the thing, her shadow, her twin, her echo, took another silent step forward. It moved without effort, like the floor wanted to hold it, like the space made room for its presence. The mirrors surrounding them pulsed with light, each one flickering between reflections of her past and flickers of its future. The thing didn't speak again. It didn't have to. Its face spoke for it. Her face, molded perfectly, but devoid of flaw, or warmth, or doubt. The kind of face meant to be worn. Believable. Lovable. Trustworthy. And behind the eyes, nothing. Just the house. Just hunger. Just the need to walk. Lydia's hands curled into fists, fingernails digging into her palms hard enough to draw blood. The house stirred beneath her feet, as if tasting it. "I am not a door," she whispered, voice shaking. "Not anymore." The thing tilted its head. Then, slowly, like a stage performer, its mouth opened again. But this time it didn't speak. It breathed. And the breath was hers. Warm, cinnamon sweet. The scent of her grandmother's kitchen. Her father's old coat. The smell of the creek behind her childhood home. It exhaled everything she thought she'd forgotten. And she breathed it in before she could stop herself. A memory struck her like lightning. Standing in the hallway the night she ran. Holding the bundle. Her mother sobbing behind her. The stair creaking beneath her weight. The door opening without her touch. She hadn't dropped the bundle. She hadn't left it. She had handed it over. Hands reaching out of the dark had taken it. Willingly. Lydia gasped and fell to her knees, tears burning her cheeks. And the thing knelt with her. Mirroring. Mocking. Or maybe mourning. Because it hadn't lied. She had always been the door. But knowing it now, fully, completely, that changed something. The mirrors stopped flickering. They waited. And Lydia stood. one final time. If she was the door, then she would choose what walked through her, and what would never walk again. She looked the thing in the eye. "I remember everything," she said, "and I choose me." The thing didn't recoil. It didn't hiss or howl or dissolve like a banished spirit. It just stood there, watching, still wearing her skin, still smiling that quiet, patient, waiting smile. But it didn't speak, because it no longer had to. Everything it needed was in the mirrors, and the mirrors were in her. Lydia stood tall. The air shifted around her. The room stirred. She could feel the house watching, not just the memory of it, not just this dream room between worlds, but the true thing, the intelligence behind the walls. The great, vast hollow that had waited for her to open just wide enough. And she had. But now she stood open on purpose, and that made her dangerous. She closed her eyes. The memories swirled. Room 6. The mirrors. The child in the crib. The bundle in her arms. The mask. The cost. She welcomed it. All of it. The truth didn't scare her anymore. It armed her. "I see you," she whispered, not to the thing in front of her, but to the house around her. "I see what you are, and I know what I am." The floor beneath her feet warmed. Not threatening. Responsive. She reached into her pocket. Something solid, smooth. She didn't remember putting it there. When she pulled it free, her breath caught. It was the black key. The one that had taken her name. Its edges shimmered. It was whole again. And now, it pulsed in her hand like a heart. The mirrors behind her began to crack, one by one. But they didn't shatter. They opened. Each one now showed a room. Rooms the house had taken. People it had borrowed. Doors it had walked through. It was all connected. All part of her now. "I'm not a door," Lydia said louder this time. "I'm a lock." She thrust the key into the thing's chest. It didn't scream. It just blinked. And for the first time, stepped back. The mirrors behind it went dark. The house groaned. But Lydia only turned the key. Once. Twice. 3 times. The thing collapsed into ash. And the ash into memory. And the memory into nothing. Ash swirled at her feet, soft as snowfall, rising with the tremor of the house around her. The mirrors moaned, not in pain, not in rage, but in disbelief. Lydia stood alone now at the center of room 6, key in hand, no longer hunted. No longer hollow. The house, if it could be called that anymore, had felt her choice. And it didn't like it. The floor quaked once. Twice. Cracks laced outward in every direction, as if the room was splintering from within. Not collapsing, but shedding. The false layers. The masks. The halls behind halls. The memory paths that had bound her inside. "You tricked me," Lydia whispered into the groaning air. "But I let you." Dust fell from the ceiling like ash from an altar. Somewhere beyond the walls, she heard it, the faint, echoing laughter of her other selves. The ones who had smiled too soon. The ones who hadn't made it to the crib. The ones who had worn the mask. But their voices were quieter now. Their power had dimmed. She looked down at the key in her palm. Its edges had dulled. The heat inside it faded. It had done its job. She walked to the mirror. It was no longer a portal. No longer a cage. Just a tall pane of glass, cracked down the center. No reflection stared back. Only light. The first honest light she'd seen in room 6. She raised the key one last time. Not to turn. To finish. With a single, firm motion, she plunged the key into the crack in the mirror. The glass didn't shatter. It dissolved. Light spilled out, golden and warm, not eerie, not haunted. The kind of light that smelled like summer mornings and clean linen. like windows open after too long shut, like truth. And from within the light came a voice. You may leave. Simple. Final. Not a command. Permission. Lydia stepped through. Not afraid. Not uncertain. Behind her, the house exhaled and began to fold. Not burn. Not collapse. Fold inward, like a book closed at the last page. The mirrors turned to dust. The walls withdrew into themselves. Room 6 became a hollow echo. And then, nothing. Lydia stepped out into dusk. The world was still. The air cool. The stars just beginning to wake. The house was gone. Not behind her. Not beneath her. Just gone. And Lydia stood where it had once been, whole. Scarred. Named. Unhaunted. She opened her palm. The black key had vanished. In its place, her name, etched faintly into her skin, like an old scar just healed. Lydia May Cross. Not a door. Not a vessel. Just a woman. And she smiled. The grass beneath her feet was damp with evening dew. She felt it soak through her shoes, cold but comforting, real. No more groaning floorboards. No more breathing wallpaper. No reflections moving where they shouldn't. Just wind. Stars. The soft trill of crickets. Lydia stood on the clearing where the house had once loomed, staring at the outline its absence had left in the land. Not an imprint. Not a foundation. Just space. As if the house had been lifted from the earth like a weed, roots and all. For a long time, she didn't move. She just breathed. In through the nose. Out through the mouth. Air that didn't carry secrets. Light that didn't flicker. The world felt new again. But not unfamiliar. She knew this peace. It had lived somewhere inside her all along, buried beneath years of guilt and grief and dreams she'd been too afraid to chase. And now, it had room to breathe. She walked toward where the front porch used to be. Her feet stirred loose soil and old leaves, but no hidden doors yawned open. No mirror shimmered behind the trees. Nothing whispered her name. She smiled, faint but genuine. And for the first time in years, she felt nothing watching her back. Just herself. Whole. Tired. Free. A breeze swept past her, rustling through the clearing, and in it, she thought she heard a voice. Not the house. Not the echo of her fears. Her mother. Not pleading. Not afraid. Just a whisper. Well done. Lydia closed her eyes and let it pass through her. She didn't speak in return. She didn't have to. The past had been heard. The child in the bundle. The door in the floor. The woman in the mirror. All seen. All named. All laid to rest. The road back to town would be long. But the weight would be light. And this time, when she returned to her apartment, her world, her life, there would be no doors waiting behind doors. No letters in the mailbox. No mirror asking her to remember. The house was gone. And in its place, just Lydia. Lydia didn't speak of the house. Not to the woman at the cafe who asked if she was new in town. Not to the older man at the gas station who said, "You've got that look, like you've walked through something." And not to the therapist she eventually visited, who scribbled down words like trauma release, and lucid delusion, and symbolic closure. Some things couldn't be translated. Some doors, even when closed, needed no further explanation. But she kept the scar. On her palm, faint and crescent-shaped, where the mirror shard had sliced her during the breaking. It faded slowly, week by week, like an old story written in pencil. But she traced it each morning, just to remember it was there. She started painting again. Images she hadn't touched in years. Nothing literal. Just fragments. Empty hallways. Cracked windows. A figure with no face sitting in a rocking chair made of vines. She never painted room 6. That stayed locked in her mind. Instead, she painted the forest beyond it, the sky above it, a house unbuilt. One afternoon in early autumn, she stood outside her apartment, sun warm on her shoulders, and felt something strange. Stillness. But not the hollow kind. The kind that meant no one was waiting on the other side of the door. That whatever had followed her home was finally gone. She stepped inside and passed the hallway mirror without flinching. No reflection out of sync. No shadows lingering. Just her. She brewed tea and sat by the window, sketchpad in hand. Drew a door. Not a tall one. Not black wood. Just a child's bedroom door, covered in glow-in-the-dark stars and a taped-up drawing of a cat. She added a note stuck to the top. Do not disturb. I'm dreaming. And below it, in small script, this door opens out. She smiled. When the tea cooled, she drank it anyway. There was a life waiting to be lived. Not a perfect one. Not a clean one. But one that belonged to her. Because she had walked through the worst of it, and had come out the other side not just alive, but awake. Fall deepened. Leaves turned brittle and red, piling in soft mounds along curbs and trails. Lydia took long walks through the turning trees, sometimes with music, sometimes with silence. Always with purpose. The house no longer followed her, but echoes still lived in quiet corners. In puddles that lingered too long. In the mirror above the bathroom sink when she stepped out of the shower and caught herself blinking too slowly. They were only glimmers now, aftershocks, not afterlives. One morning, she walked past the creek behind the neighborhood. It was shallow, glassy. Leaves floated by in slow procession. She paused, crouched, and looked down into the still water. Her reflection gazed up. No delay. No false smile. Just her. She dipped her fingers into the stream and disturbed the image. Ripples danced across the surface. But when the water calmed, the face that returned was unchanged. That night she dreamed, not of the house, but of doors that led nowhere. Just blank thresholds and tall fields of grass. They didn't whisper. They didn't knock. They were there because she remembered them. Not because they needed her. She woke smiling. Something had shifted. Not the kind of shift you notice in a sudden gasp, but a gentle unraveling of thread. She realized she no longer feared mirrors. In fact, she'd stopped covering the one in her bedroom. She'd even hung another above her desk, one she found at a flea market. Oval, brass-rimmed, slightly warped. She'd looked at her reflection in it every morning for a week. And it always looked back. No movement out of sync. No whispers in the glass. No masks beneath her skin. Just Lydia. Older. Wiser. Free. And yet, one night, as she turned off the lights and lay in bed, she felt something shift in the air. Not fear, but attention. The house was gone. But the story remained. She had become its final chapter. And some stories, especially those sealed behind 7 doors, do not end with silence. The next morning, Lydia woke to rain. Soft, slow, more like a whisper than a storm. She lay in bed for a while, watching it trail down the windowpane like tears that didn't belong to her. The apartment was still. She rose, wrapped herself in a sweater, and padded to the kitchen for tea. Everything was where she'd left it. No sounds in the walls. No movement in the mirrors. She sat by the window and let the steam warm her face as she watched the street below slowly fill with puddles. The house had been gone for weeks now. Long enough for routine to settle back into her bones. She went to the store. She answered emails. She painted. But the dreams hadn't fully left. They'd changed. Less labyrinth, more simple. 7 doors in a meadow. 6 closed. 1 ajar. She never walked through them in the dream. She only stood at the edge of the field and watched. Sometimes there was a child standing near the open door. Sometimes a woman. Sometimes no one. But always the same feeling. Something still waited. Not for her. From her. She didn't run from it. She listened. She watched. She began to sketch the dream doors during her mornings. One per page. They were never the same twice. Each had its own language. Flowers carved into the frame, or an arch of stars, or wood that bled red. But the seventh door. It stayed half open, always. And on its threshold sat a book. Old, leather-bound, unmarked. She'd drawn it dozens of times. Never the inside. Only the cover. Until one morning, weeks after the loss. She didn't buy a new journal. She didn't pick one from the store. It arrived. In a plain package, no return address, no receipt. Just her name. Inside the book. Leather-bound. No title. The pages edged in dark crimson, like old ink or dried wine. It smelled faintly of cedar and smoke. Lydia ran her fingers over the cover. Her heartbeat didn't quicken. Her breath didn't catch. She simply knew. This was for her. That evening, with the rain whispering against the windows and the lights low, she opened it. The first page was blank. The second too. On the third, in her own handwriting, though she hadn't written it, was a single line. The door didn't end. It became me. She stared at it for a long time. Then she turned the page. Blank. And so, she picked up her pen. And wrote. She didn't know what guided her. There was no outline. No plan. Just instinct. Like the house had left behind a key inside her ribcage. And now it turned with every word. The story flowed. Not the story of the house, but what followed it. The space left behind. The silence. The things that tried to fill it. She wrote of memories resurfacing in dreams, of people she passed in the street who wore unfamiliar faces but familiar eyes. She wrote of reflections that sometimes blinked slower than she did, not out of malice, but of fatigue. She wrote of a world just a breath to the left of this one, where doors didn't need hinges. They needed names. And she had many names now, each one a scar, a thread, a path. Somewhere around midnight, she stopped writing and looked at the page. Her hands ached. Her tea was cold. The book had grown heavier. She swore the spine was thicker than before. And the room around her felt closer, like the walls had leaned in to read over her shoulder. But there was no fear. Just the quiet understanding. The story wasn't done. She was the story. The book waited for her each night. She didn't keep it on a shelf. It lived beside her bed, resting on the nightstand like a candle that never needed to be lit. Sometimes, Lydia woke up at 3:13 a.m., always 3:13, and found it open, though she was sure she closed it. The pages would whisper as if recently turned. The air would smell faintly of ash and wildflowers. Once, she saw a word she hadn't written yet. Just one. Listen. She started keeping her windows cracked at night, letting in the soft sounds of wind and tree limbs shifting. The world felt quieter now, but not empty. Just attentive. The more she wrote, the more the silence filled with weight. Not burdened presence. The kind that made her pause when she passed certain doorways or caught her own eyes and reflections too long. Not because something was behind them. Because something wasn't. The hunger was gone. The house had been devoured by her memory, its shape sealed in her words. But the absence it left behind, that was something else. She began dreaming of a library. Endless shelves. Books with no titles, but familiar spines. She'd wander the aisles, barefoot and silent, the floor warm beneath her. She'd reach for a book, open it, and read a moment from her own life, rephrased, refracted, changed. One night, she opened a volume and found an entry she didn't recognize. The door at the edge of the world opened, not to let her in, but to let something out. She woke breathless. Outside, the wind had picked up. The curtain fluttered. The book beside her lay open again. This time, the words on the page were fresh, ink still drying. When she writes, they remember. When she stops, they forget. That night, she didn't sleep. She wrote. Not because something told her to, but because she wanted to. The house may have collapsed into silence, but silence, she was learning, was not the end. It was a pause, a breath, a place where stories sleep, waiting to be dreamed again. Winter came quietly. No sudden frost. Just a soft grayness that curled around rooftops and power lines, that nestled between the spaces where summer used to live. Lydia felt the shift in her bones, not with dread, but with a kind of reverence. She was learning to live differently now, with stillness, with slowness, with the awareness that time was no longer just a clock, but a hallway she could walk, pause, and listen in. The book had filled halfway. Every page carried something new, dreams, memories, fragments of places she couldn't have known, yet somehow recognized. A woman standing at the mouth of a cave with no face. A child tracing symbols in the condensation on a fogged window. A voice whispering poetry into the ear of a weeping tree. They weren't stories in the traditional sense. They were echoes. Lydia began sharing them, anonymously, online. Short pieces at first, then longer ones. She created a pen name, May Cross. Her middle name and a reminder of the line she'd once walked between herself and the house. Readers found her. A quiet following. People who'd lived with silence. With doors they were afraid to name. With dreams they didn't tell anyone for fear of what might listen. The comments trickled in, reverent and raw. You wrote something I thought only I dreamed. This reminded me of a hallway I haven't thought about since I was 10. I don't know why, but I cried. And Lydia realized something powerful. She wasn't just closing her own door. She was helping others name theirs. Every story she released was a tether. A thread across the dark. A soft lantern for someone else's room 6. One evening, as snow began to fall in thick, muffled silence, she walked to the window and stared into the mirror across the room. Her reflection blinked. Smiled. Not too slowly. Not too quickly. Just right. And for the first time, she raised her hand, not to test the mirror, not to challenge it, but to wave. To greet it. Because what stared back now wasn't the house. It was her, dreaming forward. The pen she used was old, an inexpensive ballpoint with a tiny crack near the grip. But it never ran out of ink. She'd stopped questioning that weeks ago. Like the house, like the book, the pen had become part of her story now. It didn't matter how it worked. It mattered what it opened. Each time she pressed it to paper, the room changed. Not visibly. Not drastically. Just in feeling. In tension. In breath. The air grew still, like a held inhale. And when the final word landed, the room exhaled. She wasn't alone while writing, but the presence she felt wasn't sinister anymore. It wasn't hunger. It wasn't teeth. It was audience. Listening. Waiting. Receiving. She had become a threshold of her own, a boundary between nightmare and memory, fear and voice. The door that once devoured her now lived at the tip of her pen, and instead of swallowing her, it released what had never been spoken. One morning, she awoke to find the black key again. It sat on the desk beside her journal, glinting faintly in the winter light. This time, it bore a word etched into the shaft. Speak. No more locks. No more silence. The key wasn't a warning anymore. It was a tool. Something to be held, not feared. She placed it on a chain and wore it around her neck. Not to keep it close, to keep it visible. She wanted to remember, and she wanted others to see it. At the coffee shop where she wrote, a barista once asked, "Cool necklace. Is that real?" And she'd smiled. "It opens stories." The barista laughed, not unkindly. "You a writer or something?" Lydia just nodded. "Something like that." That afternoon, she wrote a scene in which a little girl sat on the edge of her bed, holding a mask in her lap. The mask had no eyes, but it watched her. The girl didn't flinch. She placed the mask on the pillow beside her and whispered, "You don't have to hide anymore." When Lydia finished the page, her window fogged gently. And on the glass, in delicate, trembling lines, a child's finger had drawn a symbol. A circle, split into 7 pieces, the last one shaded in. The 7th segment was filled. Not in ink, not in blood, not even by her own hand. Just there, drawn lightly on the fogged window, so soft it might have been mistaken for nothing at all, unless you knew what it meant. Lydia stared at the symbol, heart quietly beating in her throat. It was complete now. The circle, the house, the path, her. She didn't panic, didn't gasp or retreat. She simply traced her fingertip along the edge of the 7th arc. It felt cool, damp, real. As real as the smell of snow coming in through the cracked window. As real as the black key resting warm against her chest. She knew this wasn't a threat. It was a marking, a gentle reminder. The door had closed. The cycle had ended. But the echo of it would always ripple. She pressed her palm flat to the foggy pane, aligning it with the center of the circle. The glass felt thin, almost pulsing, like skin over a drum. The house had once called her to let it in. But now, her hand pressed to the memory of it said something different. A goodbye. Or perhaps a promise. "I see you. You don't own me. But I remember you." And that memory, that scar, was hers now. That night she dreamed again of the field. The tall grasses had been brushed aside, flattened into spirals by wind or time. The 7 doors still stood in a ring, all of them shut now. In the center sat the same book, but this time it had a title on the cover. "Lydia May Cross, Witness." She opened it in the dream. Every page was filled with stories, some she remembered writing, some she didn't. One page in the middle was blank, a space left open, not a gap, an invitation. In the dream, she smiled. And when she woke, her pillow was damp with tears, not of sorrow, but something softer. A grief fully grieved, a scar fully named. She went to her desk, opened her real notebook, and began writing again. Not to close something, but to begin. Winter lingered. The trees stood bare and resolute, their branches like ink lines against gray sky. The world had quieted into itself, and Lydia moved through it with a steady rhythm, one step, one breath, one word at a time. But always, somewhere beneath the surface, she felt it. Another door. Not like the 7 before it. Not part of the circle. Something after. Not built by the house. Not carved from memory. Not shaped by fear. It was hers. Entirely. One morning, she dreamt she stood in front of it. The 8th door. Simple. Wooden. Unmarked. No brass knob. No carved sigil. No mirrored surface. Just a plain door, weathered by time. She approached. No whispers on the other side. No distant lullaby. Only her own heartbeat. When she reached out, her fingers hovered an inch from the surface. She didn't push. She didn't have to. The door opened inward on its own. And inside. Light. Not white, not blinding. Not soft, not cruel. Just presence. It didn't speak. It didn't demand. It welcomed. she stepped through, and woke. There was no fear left. No house hiding beneath the stairs. No crib. No mask. No echo. But her journal lay open beside her, and on the page, scrawled in her own hand, "Some doors are not meant to close. They're meant to open you." She carried the thought with her all day. And that night, when she picked up her pen, she didn't write about the house. She didn't write about doors or mirrors or voices in the walls. She wrote about a woman walking into a library with no ceiling, where the stars were shelves, where every book opened not to a chapter, but to a person. And Lydia knew then what the eighth door really was. Not a threshold between fear and safety, but between ending and becoming. Not a door she had to pass through, a door she had become. The change wasn't sudden. It didn't arrive with trumpets or dreams drenched in symbolism. It arrived in the quietest of ways. Lydia began noticing how people responded to her, not with awe, not with suspicion, but with comfort. Strangers leaned closer. Friends confided in her more. Children held her gaze longer than they used to, as though they recognized something familiar in her quiet. She had become stillness, not absence, not silence, but a room, a space where others could breathe. She was no longer someone being haunted. She was a place others came to leave pieces of their ghosts. One afternoon in spring, she hosted a writing circle in her living room. 5 people sat in a loose circle, sipping tea and scribbling quietly. A woman in her 50s read a poem about an attic she was afraid to visit. A young man shared a story about a dream he'd had as a child, one with a door that always changed location. No one judged. No one laughed. Lydia only listened, asked gentle questions, lit a candle, gave them space. After the others left, she sat alone in the warm hush of her home. No creaking floors. No shadows with teeth. No mirrors misbehaving. She walked to her own hallway mirror and looked deeply. Her reflection smiled back, softly, with annoying sadness. And Lydia whispered, "Thank you?" Not to the house. Not to the past. To the room. The one inside her. The one she'd sealed, bricked up, torn open, and finally made hers. Every person carries such a room. Some are full of broken things. Some of dust and cobwebs. Some are loud. Some are screaming. Lydia's room? It had light now, and shelves lined with books, and a chair in the corner where someone, anyone, might sit and rest a while. She was no longer the door. She was what waited on the other side. Years passed. Seasons blurred together, gentle and patient. The world grew louder outside, but inside Lydia's home, the quiet remained, a warmth that came not from silence, but from presence. Everything had settled. Everything had room. She no longer dreamed of the house, not in the old way. No crib. No masks. No knocking. But sometimes, when sleep drifted soft across her shoulders, she'd find herself walking through a hallway made of memory. The air was sweet, cool. The doors she passed were not menacing, but known. She recognized their shapes, their stories. Room 1, her first fear. Room 2, her first lie. Room 3, her silence. Room 4, her guilt. Room 5, her forgetting. Room 6, her truth. Room 7, her choice. And then, Room 8, the one she built herself. A room with no walls, no roof, just sky, just space. Just a single, wooden chair facing east, where the sun would always rise. She'd sit in that chair, even in dreams, and know. The house had never been destroyed. It had been transformed. Because houses, like stories, like scars, don't disappear. They become foundations. And hers had grown strong. One night, in her waking life, she returned to the clearing. Not to bury anything, not to burn anything, just to stand there. To feel the grass beneath her feet. To breathe air that once echoed with whispers. Now silent. Now still. And when she looked down at her shadow stretched across the grass, she smiled. Because she saw no doors. No keys. No shape behind her. Only herself. Present. Whole. She sat in the field and pulled out a notebook. Tattered, leather-bound, worn by time. Not the black book. A new one. The first page held a sentence. This story does not begin with fear. She wrote until dusk, and when the stars came out, she didn't flinch. She welcomed them. Each one a window in the dark. Each one a room where someone else might be waiting to remember their name. And the house? The house rested now. It waited not to be feared, but to be understood. Because in the end, all rooms want is for someone to come back and turn on the light.